welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today we are joined by a very special guest, Tara Arcobelli from the Household Advisor. So she always heralds and leads our February in Soul Driven Motherhood, which is all about how we create the space in which we rise, become the person that we're wanting to manifest in the year ahead, but also in a really beautiful way, learn from and say goodbye to the human and the space that she represents in the year that's preceded. So today, the conversation that we're going to be having is how representative your physical home is of your emotional, mental, and physical body as your home, and what one space reflects about the other, what we can learn from the space in which we and our families live, and what you might want to change in order to really bring manifest what you're seeking to achieve this year. So, Tara, I'd love for you to just say hello, and then we'll run in with our spiel, and we would love to then really have this conversation with you.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you both.
We're so happy to have you. We're so excited.
So, Bridget, would you like to read Tara's bio, and then we'll kick it off from there? Because I normally do the spiel here of please.
You normally do the spiel.
I know. I'm messing up the system. So, all right, let me dive in with that. So we're all not on a loose hook going, this feels weird. We would love you to join our newsletter space, where we just let you know what's happening in the world once every sort of few weeks. All the podcasts, all the links, everything you've missed, everything that's happening in our world, so that you can pick and choose. We'd love to dive deeper. And you are able to connect with more Nourishing the Mother during your weeks, so that you don't miss a beat by dropping in your email address at nourishingthemother.com.au.
Beautiful. So Tara is the Household Advisor. She's a mentor, facilitator, and holistic organisational specialist. Tara is drawn to homes, spaces, and the environment that people live in. Each day, Tara works to better understand herself, her relationships, her home, and her spaces, and helps her clients do the same. Tara helps women cultivate a home environment that nourishes their soul by unpacking their household patterns, habits, and behaviours. Tara helps women get unstuck and come home to themselves. And we've got to say, yes, she does, because last year, you and I, Jules and I, both invited Tara into our very intimate spaces that are our homes. And what Tara was able to tug at in terms of our own habitual patterns and threads and vulnerabilities and emotional stories that our homes represent was really just beautiful and at times confronting, wasn't it, Jules?
Yeah, 100% it was. But I'm so grateful for that time and that space. And that did radically change. Not that we knew back then we were going to have the year that we had, but now I can see how radically that offered me space mentally, emotionally, but also just as a family, because we're a family of 6 in a really tiny 3-bedroom home with a single living space. It's really small. So the area that we focused on, Tara, was my children's bedrooms, because I just could not handle the clutter and it was hard for me to be around and in, and hard for them. And we totally somehow magically made it a minimalist space, which I didn't think was possible in a, old retro 60s home with no storage, and really created, I suppose, the essence that I wanted all of us to bathe in those spaces, which was to feel clear and clean, and that sense of, I feel really good here, rather than there's more stuff to distract my mind than what my body can handle. And look, I'm really thrilled to say that has absolutely stayed that way for us, and led the way to me really seeing manifest then the new bunks and spaces for my kids' beds and the wardrobe installations in everybody's bedroom that I can't imagine I would have foreseen had I not first created the space for which that became a then manifest reality. So their bedrooms are still have clear floors with only these little, I bought another set of suitcases for the other bedrooms, these like metal suitcases.
They're gorgeous.
It's so great. And so my girls just have their 2 suitcases with their Barbies and little bits and pieces in their bedroom, and that's it. That's all that's on the floor. And that feels magnificent still. So I'm really grateful.
Thank you. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It was such a pleasure to work with you too. And I was going to say, do you think that set you up really well going into what we obviously didn't know we were going to go into a lockdown, but could you have imagined having experienced 2020 with all of that sort of clutter and stuck and feeling
no
that
way. I think it was all divine intervention in a way, wasn't it? Because they were the 2 spaces. I've really only got my bedroom and the living room outside of that. So let's say it's not a big space, but my bedroom and the living room, pretty well sorted. Kitchen, pretty well sorted. It was my kids' bedroom that I was so stuck with and on, and could not work out how I could feel good walking into that space, and how I could shift perceptions and views for this to be a really beautiful choice rather than what it looked like, which was making do with the best we could, which it wasn't. It was always a conscious choice for me to live in this space, and I just couldn't see that manifest in these spaces. And my 2 eldest kids often would sit on, because we then bought double beds for the big kids, would often sit together on the double bed in one of the bedrooms next to each other just to work in a clean space that no one else was in. And I thought, my goodness, there's no way that we could have homeschooled with a tiny person, like a little 2 to 3-year-old, plus a primary schooler, plus 2 high school kids in 3 bedrooms and 1 living space, plus my husband home full-time working, plus me working through that. Like, that's
a lot.
5 out of 6 people trying to work out how to function as best as they possibly can. And that was the last of the space physically that was stopping ease and flow. So I can't imagine that we could have created the experiences that we did have as a family had we not had bedrooms that were extremely functional and inviting as a space. And I think just, good juju, they just, like, the energy in them just flows when it's so clear, So I think it was divine intervention. Perfect.
Good timing. How did you go, Bridget? What did you think? How did you go with your office?
Oh, so good. The office, it was a funny one. There's a lot of resistance for me with the office, and a lot of distraction, and I was finding it hard. Even you can see, even in the videos that are in Soul Driven Motherhood, that that's trying to showcase the transformation. I can even see it in the way I was holding my body, just in kind of the heaviness of sorting through my office, because for me it was a representation of so much half-finished stuff, or so many notebooks and so much books and so much learning that felt a little dense for me. And having you in there and having your perspective as we were going through it all was just so powerful, because I got to see myself differently, and I got to understand my habits in a new way, which has really informed how I view that space. And I'm still working through it. I'm still finding myself choosing to work in my bedroom more than I'm choosing to work in that space. So there's still some resistance there. But just being able to be aware, because this is the thing, and I'm sure you've seen this too, Tara, that if you don't work through what has got you there in terms of the way you use your spaces, then they just go back to the way they were. It's a little bit like somebody who tries to like go on a diet and lose weight. Unless you deal with the underlying emotions behind why you have the diet that you have, then you'll just swing back to where you were before, after that initial kind of, you know, whatever it is.
100%. Well, that's it. Someone can come in and do it all for you.
Yeah.
And then you'll just revert back. So and that's why I say I'll have you seeing it differently, because then we're looking at what's going on. So we're seeing the surface, but we're also then looking underneath at what habits and behaviours are driving you to do that. To not make those decisions, or to make those types of decisions, or to avoid. And as you were saying, you only know what you're comfortable with, like what you've grown up with, like that dynamic. And a lot of your organisational skill set is learned. It's not, you're not really taught it in school, you're not really taught it in university. It's whatever was modelled to you in the home. And it's not like we live with, I mean, obviously you could have some housemates and things like that, but you're not living in 10 or 15 different family dynamics, like to get that sort of perspective. So I say that all the time, because every time I work with someone new, I go, wow, so there's another way to do this, and there's another way to do this, and I like that, and they do that better. And it's really, really fascinating. But you're right, it's all the habits and behaviours and the neural pathways and everything that you've learnt and had role model to you, and then whatever you've picked up, you're then role modelling to the next generation. Yeah. So it's that beauty of that awareness of saying, okay, I really like this about my childhood home, and I'm going to continue that and teach it to my children. And there's a few things here that I wish, like, how can I do those sort of differently? And I often then find too, when you go into a home, it's those areas and those rooms that are telling you where that work is.
Yeah.
But unless you're really sitting with it and having someone sort of help you and sort of facilitate you through it, because you don't know any different, it's very hard to see it. And like, even for me, I found in 2020, the gift of lockdown is that I can see most of my stuff, but there's still some that I can't. But lockdown was a totally different experience. Like, we'd never been there. Like, I'd never seen my house play that sort of role, that intense role. So it had me looking at my spaces at a different level as well, and going, oh, there's more here. Like, this is a one-stop shop. This has become like our bubble. We've got 2 businesses running here. We've got a kinder running. We've got a school running. Like, it has to play a different purpose. So what do I need to change here? So I too, like, I've sort of been through it. I sort of went through it with you, and I went through it with some clients, and then I feel like I did the best, like, deep dive, because I feel like your home is one of the best training grounds, because you can do it, and you can do it within that home, and what you learn from that you can then take kind of out and into your life, because it's almost like different rooms of the house are different areas of life as well, I feel. So
can you expand on that a little? And like, what do you mean by that when you say different homes are different, almost like different areas of your life?
Different depending on, like, people will have certain rooms that are harder than others. So when we looked at you and your sort of your office, and I see that as being sort of that career and business area. So if you're sort of stuck, or sometimes it can be financial as well. So you could be sort of stuck there. If it's, sometimes like the kitchen, it can sometimes be about like food and even entertaining and the social aspect, and even like the playroom. Like, that was a big one for us. We had a sort of a big playroom, but I opened it right up during lockdown because it was driving me crazy. But I was in that transition of my daughter being in kinder, sort of coming out of that toddler phase, and like getting rid of baby gates and things like that. So as I did that, like, everyone would be like, oh, that's quite simple. But the emotion for me was like, oh, are we not going back? Like, are we not having another child? Like, is this the next part of my life? And I feel like I had to clear that in order to be like, okay, we're through that. I'm closing that door and I'm sort of moving on. And for me, this year is our my husband's office, because as you were saying, I've been working from kind of all over the house all of the last year, like wherever everyone was home. So like the kids have their own beautiful school desk and school station, and my husband's got his area, but I was kind of just all over the house. And this year I'm like, no, I'm ready to take up space. I'm ready to dive into this. So now I need to create a space for me that's inspiring and nourishing, and bringing in all those words that I've pinpointed for myself this year. And I need to then create that to help sort of drive and facilitate my creativity and where my business is going to go. So there's lots of, laundry, there are all sorts of different dynamics going on, and too, depending on what your sort of generational patterning is and the stories that you're carrying. But there's always sort of lots of common themes and things like that when I go into houses, and I'll often be able to say, oh, so where are you sort of stuck? Oh, that's quite representative of those piles, because often, as I say, piles are just unmade decisions. So in those areas of your life where you're not making those decisions, is that resistance. So it's represented in your stuff, but it's also representative of, like, it's your life. It's being, reflected back. So as I said, during lockdown, I really had to sit there and be like, okay, so what are my spaces going to teach me? And we were pretty well set up in terms of, I had the house quiet. It wasn't a huge change because we both worked from home and the children are home quite a lot. But it was still kind of a deep dive into what's the next step on the other side of this, and how can I make that sort of more comfortable, and how can I make us all sort of thrive? So then bringing the kids in, like, what do the kids need on top of, okay, so my husband's needs, what are my needs, what does my son need for school, and then what does my daughter need for kinder, and then making all of our rooms and literally every square inch of our home fit that. And I feel like we did quite a good job of it.
I must comment on that in terms of how do I make this space work for my kids, because this can be the kind of thing that the kids can easily be forgotten, right? The kids can be like, not really considered amongst the desire to sort the home. But yet I know with Jules, and also with me and with my kids, you came in and spent time observing them and really understanding what was important to them, so that any change that was made was done collaboratively, so that also made it sustainable, and it made it something that they could contribute to and feel respected in. And that is also where I think we've got longevity with the changes that you've made, because you came in and helped Hugo set up a space for his Lego, which he still uses, and you helped organise all of our cupboards and Sylvie's craft, which she still uses and knows where to find everything and helps organise. And so because they were able to co-create those new spaces and felt empowered in doing that, that's also made it far more easeful for me and my husband to be able to continue with that, because they're part of that, not just brought along absent-mindedly,
Correct. And I think it's important because there's so much of you're imprinting all the time on them. So you want them to be contributing and co-creating with you. And even yesterday, I was writing down some notes for our chat, and Luca came down, he's 7, and sat down next to me, and we had a really long conversation about what was the experience for you, and what would you say about our spaces, and what did you learn about our spaces? Like, I ran through sort of all the questions I'd been talking to you about to get a really good perspective, because I worked with both of them, to really because they're at such different stages, with Eva being in 3-year-old kinder and Luca being in grade 1, there's quite the age gap. So I had to facilitate an environment where she could explore, and hers became, because we could only go for a walk around the block. That was at one point all we could do. She loved nature and flowers. So we would pick flowers every day, and then we built her a flower garden. So the whole front of our house now is a flower garden. So we were bringing that in, and then Luca got his workstation, and I guess worked with him every day to make sure that he could learn, it was the best environment for me. So for him, talking to him, what do you need? Because he was in the living area, so in the communal area. Do you need us to be quiet? Do you not want anyone to be in there? How do we want to set it up. And then he got all his Lego creations that he'd made during lockdown, and he had them lined up on the fireplace, and he made like a Lego trophy when we had a competition one day, and I haven't had the heart to take them down. Like, they're all still sitting up on our mantelpiece because it's just such a beautiful reminder of that time. And he said to me yesterday when I asked him, he said, oh, well, most people think being at home is really boring, but if I learned anything last year, it's that there's so much to do at home. There's just so many ways to entertain ourselves. We've just got to look. We've just got to kind of look outside. That, you know, people just think that you just go home and you should watch screens, but he's like, there's just, you know, there's so much. Like, we have a pool, and obviously in the middle of winter it's freezing, but the kids were doing leaf races and we were fishing and just getting really creative with what we had. And then too, I think looking a lot at then regulation. So, and I remember Julie and your swing in your living room, and we have a swing in our backyard, and Eva every day at about 4:30 without fail would just get up from whatever she was doing and she would walk outside and she'd spend half an hour swinging. I just said to my husband, it's been a big day, she needs to regulate. And I just really made sure too that we built that in, and for my son, and then what each of us then needed as well. So yeah, it taught me a lot. Yeah,
I'd love to reflect on that too, that was also one of my biggest joys, having you work with me and my kids. Was very kid focused in my house because it was their bedrooms, and the care and the presence and diligence with which you met each and every one of them to ensure that their needs, but beyond that the piece that was missing for me was how to reflect them in their spaces, because all I could see was what didn't fit for me and what made my nervous system uncomfortable, and what you saw, and I really think facilitated me beyond my projections and into really creating the space that I wanted for them, but couldn't see beyond my own nervous system situation, was their values. And that's still the case, right? Like, my daughters still have their values of social friends, and my eldest, now we've moved things around, she loves plants, so she's like building in plants and vision boards. And my son, we did put the shelves up for his shoes so he could showcase those, and hanging special basketball things up, like just really what seems like really simple additions, but actually I hadn't sat with or considered, and what personalizes that space. But beyond it's not even personalizing it, it was the fact of being very selective about what went on those walls, because it wasn't on floors, what went on the walls that would hit up their nervous system, brain and hormonal pathways with their top values, so that they stay inspired for longer. And that was deeply meaningful to me. So that also has remained a co-creation with them, which is, I always think I'm so grateful for that, because I wouldn't have seen it.
And how much do you think that also helped your teenagers, particularly during lockdown, when it was a time of, for some teenagers, really really challenging to their identity, because their identity is so much formed by their social interaction? Was having this space reflect them authentically help, you know, kind of help them to feel more connected to themselves, do you think?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I haven't spent time reflecting on it, but now you're saying it, and I'm like, yeah, of course, you know, which is so great to have the space just to reflect on that.
Yeah.
I hadn't sat with it, but I don't have a question. Like, they chose to sit side by side, but they chose to be in their bedrooms to study. Like, the door was always open. We have an open door policy, but they always chose to be together within their bedrooms rather than out in my space in the lounge room, right? Which the walls are plastered with my top values. And they're like, I'd rather be in my own, thanks very much.
Yeah.
So, you know, now I'm reflecting on it, I'm like, yeah, I can see that. That would be stimulating and wholesome for their nervous system to be interacting with. Yeah, definitely. So, Tara, I know that we are going to be doing a couple of workshops with you in February in Soul-Driven Motherhood, but what I would really love for you to talk about is just the reflection on the holistic part of what you don't know. We've talked on it, but what perhaps our listeners who may or may not be part of Soul-Driven Motherhood and have deeper access to you, although of course they can connect with you, and we put all of that at the end of the podcast and in the show notes, so please make sure that you check out how to find Tara. But what is it that you think about when you think, what did your spaces teach you about you? What did you learn and what did you change? What is that riff on that, I suppose, that really speaks to you about why that's holistically so important when we're decluttering and creating space in our homes?
Well, I think for me, it's really, in essence, about seeing you. So really getting to see, when I go into a home, to see my client as they are. So to really see them in much the same way that in my house I see myself, and then getting to the bottom of what their desires are and what their values are, and then within that what they want their home and life to be off the back of that. Because I know that you talk a lot about getting to know, I guess, what lights you up and what you desire and what you value and what is important to you. And I think that societally at the moment, because we're sort of being bombarded with so much input and stimulus and consume more and have more and things like that, we sort of lose like the core of who we are and the essence of who we are. So, and when I say holistically, I'm not just going into your home to look at your stuff. Like, I'm going into your home to look at you, to see who you are, and then to see who each of those individuals are that live within that home, and where, you know, what their deepest desires are and what they want and what they're finding really, really hard and why they're finding that hard. And then I guess a part of that is then looking back as well. So it's looking at your sort of your lineage and what was role modeled to you and what you learned and what habits and behaviours and things like that often, like, you can't see it for yourself. Like, it's very hard to see it for yourself. And as Bridget said, you can hire as many, you know, cleaners and organisers and things like that can come in, but until you've actually addressed why you are making the decisions that you are making and why you have those behaviours or what those habits kind of are about, it's not going to change in the same way, if you know what I mean. There's not going to be that sort of deep change. So I like to think that it's a lot about spaces and items and decluttering and things, but it's much more about a deep dive almost into your psyche as to what is really going on and what is being represented in that. So it's going in and seeing you, it's feeling your energy, it's feeling those spaces, because I'm a very deep I'm a deep thinker, but I'm a very deep sort of feeler, and I can go in and just sort of sit with, in much as I was saying with your children, and just sit there and be like, what lights them up, what's important to them, because we all want to live in a beautiful, like a sanctuary that is building us up, because I feel like the outside world so much of the time is tearing us down. I'm not necessarily tearing us down, but it's telling us be this way or do that, or if you buy that, or if you have that, or if you look this way, but at the end of the day, we just want to be seen for who we are and loved for who we are and loved for all our quirks and what makes us unique. And I think there's such a relationship between that and your home. And I feel like too in 2020, for a lot, like, that was an opportunity for people to really dive in and sit with themselves, because we didn't have the distractions. We couldn't, you know, because, you know, we could be basically busy and stimulated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of our lives. Whereas this was a beautiful opportunity to be like, okay, does this feel good? Like, is this environment that I am bathing in 24 hours a day feeling really good for me, or is it not? And if it's not, let's do something about it. Like, let's sit there. And I've had to sit with myself. There were things too that I didn't like that I've had to really grow through and work through. And it was brutal. Like, some of those times, like the first lot of lockdown, not so bad. Second time in was really painful. Like, every day, like, I've just got to keep getting up and keep doing this and kind of keep facing. But as I said to you, when we cleared our playroom space, I was just like, what do I need to change? I need more space. I need more light. I need to feel like there's more flow. I need less stimulation, and particularly with the kids learning, the less stuff in your spaces, the less sort of overstimulated you become. And I was like, so what am I going to do? And a couple of times my husband turned to me and he said to me, what would you say to your clients? do it. Don't complain about it. Just like, you just call me out on it. Like,
and I love that you say that, because even though this is your area of expertise, you're still facing the same stuff because you're still human.
100%. 100%. And he, because I have to do it to him, so he will very much do it to me. And I'll say to him, what am I not seeing? What am I not saying? And we do come from very polar opposites, so very different. And I just think that is the greatest blessing almost there, because sometimes you'll say something and I'll be like, what? Like, I can't even imagine that you would have done it that way, or that you'd have a space like that, or that your mum would have, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just so different. And I guess too, like when you're in those spaces 24 hours a day, and then you have 2 children as well with a bit of an input. Like, my son's now old enough to, and, you know, my daughter does a little bit, she's 4, but my 7-year-old, or 7.5 now, is very happy to start turning it back on me. So all the things that I'm saying to him, and in particular too with my daughter, I started to notice that I was getting frustrated with her. Like, she was leaving things around and losing things. Like, she'd always be coming to me, oh, I've lost this, I've lost that. And I'm thinking, I'm an organisational specialist. Like, how are you losing this stuff? Like, what's going on here? And then I thought, but is a part of that too, that it's my skill set. So sometimes you because it's so natural to me, I'm then doing a lot of that for them, as opposed to then providing them with those skills. So I found with both of them, with her in particular, and she says it to me now, I said, we give everything a home. So like, we have a home, we go home to our home, and then everyone knows where we are. So the same with your items. I say, when you've finished with them, or they've finished for the day, we put them back in their homes, and then tomorrow when you want them, we put them back in our home. And we go and we know where they are. And then she'll actually say to me, oh, I lost that, Mummy. Oh, I didn't put it in my home, didn't put it in its home, and now I can't find it. Or she'll say, oh, you better put your earrings back in their home so you know where they are tomorrow. So that was beautiful with her. And then I also found too with my son in terms of grade 1, which you probably found a bit of that with Hugo, and the way that, you know, they're writing but setting out their pages, so their spaces, so structuring posters and things, and rulers and things like that. And I was getting really quite frustrated, like, it's not that hard to set out this space. And I thought, no, but I haven't sat there and taught him how to do that. So I looked, that was a huge change for him. And by the end of it, like, I didn't have to tell, like, he just sort of knew. But again, and then I started to think, well, if those are the little things, then what else are we teaching our children, if you know what I mean? And where are we gaining those skill sets from? And then I thought, wow, big picture, like, whatever our parents taught us is pretty much what we've continued on. Yeah.
I love the language of the home. I think I'm going to start using that instead of let's tidy up or pack up or whatever. Let's find
a home for it.
Yeah, let's get back in its home. I really like that, Tara. I'm gonna borrow that one.
Please, no, please, because I always say to them, everything's got to have a home, a purpose, and a function. Otherwise, you need to make a decision about it.
I gotta write that down. Can you say that again, slower?
Everything has to have a home, a purpose, or a function, or you need to make a decision about it.
That's cool.
Because all those piles and all that clutter and all those stuck places are piles of unmade decisions.
I love that too.
I wrote that down too. You're like coming out with the gold today. Piles of unmade decisions. I loved that. As soon as you said, I was like, oh my God, yes, they are.
They are. They are. And I have to sometimes, like, even to sometimes, like, I just noticed with myself, and even when I was saying during lockdown and we cleaned that playroom, and it took me a long time to do it, because I just would stop myself when it started to get hard. Or as I talk to my clients about it a lot, you get decision fatigue. So there's only a certain number of decisions that your brain can make in any day, and most people, by the time they've had breakfast, they've exhausted their brain. Like, they've just made so many decisions. So if then you're trying to do this, you know, off the back of lockdown and things like that, I would just get to a point where I'd be just like, oh, I'm just going to shove that there, I'm going to put that there, I'm going to just make a pile. I'd just be like, no, my brain is now telling me it's had enough. and I want to make this decision once and I want to make it well because I don't want to have to make it again. And there are a few things about the kids stuff that there was more of it than there needed to be, just because I hadn't really sat there. And then I thought, if I can't make this decision today, it sits there, I'll make it tomorrow, because it will annoy me so much that you know what I mean? Like, you just do it in a way that it doesn't ruin your experience, but it annoys you enough that you actually have to sit with yourself and be like, why can't I make a decision about this?
I love that you're making this point, because in fact, like, just recently we hired a massive skip bin and we filled it in a week. But the amount of like the exhaustion that I felt mentally from going through our whole house and sheds and clearing stuff, it was intense. And I was like, I haven't actually really done anything, but the weight of like this stuff and the decision making feels really heavy. And it's because of all the stories that everything carries. And then also that decision-making thing.
Absolutely.
And I think certainly working with you meant that my husband and I were both extremely ruthless. Between working with you and, like, you know, doing the condo thing a number of times, it was so refreshing this time around to just be far more discerning. Rather than, oh, maybe, you know, and just, again, being a pile of unmade decisions that hide in pockets of the home and the shed, right?
100%. And it's a no. Like, if you're unsure, I always say it's a no. And I always say, I look at something and I go, okay, what am I feeling? Because there's so much about the work that I do in the home. What am I feeling here? Stop. Like, the minute that your brain then kicks in, it's going to override it, and it's going to start saying, oh, but that cost me $50, and what if in 3 weeks I need it? And no, like, what's your gut? Like, what is that reaction? Do I love it? Do I value it? Is it a part of the life that I envision for myself? Yes, no, get rid of it and be really ruthless. But you need to be, like, in the sort of mindset to be able to do that. Like, you don't want to be doing it, I don't know, you've had the worst week, the busiest week ever, and then on that Saturday morning you decide to get up and sort of do it. Like, you've got to be quite intentional in about how you do it. So when I did our playroom space, I waited till the end of term, and then I knew I had 2 weeks with those school break, and I knew that no one was visiting because no one was allowed to visit. So there was no that expectation of, oh, I'm going to shove that in the laundry, I'm going to shove, like, do you know what I mean? I'm going to pull it apart and then I'm just going to shove it in other spots. Like, I did it so we could still live. It would annoy me enough that I would constantly do it. But I was realistic in that it takes a long time, because you are facing yourself, you are facing your patterning, you are facing your lineage, you are facing everything that you know to be true. So you have to challenge every decision. There is a challenge of who you are, and then, like, what you want for your life. And so much of that is because, one, you've done it, it's comfortable, so it's part of your family dynamic, and a lot of it you've just inherited from other people.
I actually just love that so much, because the question I was going to ask you before was, what do you say for the person who's like, oh God, you know, the mess in my house annoys me, where do they start? But you just actually answered it already, like it was intuitively in those questions just then. And now my mind's gone blank, but I love the idea of, is this part of the life I envisioned, why can't I say that? Envisioned for myself or not, and making decisions from there. I just adore that. I've just done the rounds on a few of the cupboards, and I was cleaning out our games cupboard. And as you're saying that, I'm like, yes, that's true. Because even as I'm picking up the old boxes of shitty ass puzzles that my mum's given me from the op shop or something, because she loves a puzzle, you know, it's part of our family heritage. And I'm like, don't have the space for it. We don't really have the time for these enormous puzzles that get to stay out forever and a day. And I don't even know if there's pieces missing from this, but there's this part of me that's like, you should hold on to that. You should have time for that. You shouldn't throw it out. It's still really good. It's good enough. Where could you put that? Your mum would be really sad if you threw that out. And even as I'm going, nah, it's not a truth for me. Not part of, nah, But I can see those bits ticking over. So as you were saying that, I was sitting with, oh, yeah, you the games cupboard. I have to face myself.
It's everywhere. Pretty much every item you bring into your home is a decision you've made. And then you have to live with, was that a good decision? And then I also think that every item that you have takes up space. So it's taking up space. It's influencing the energy and the flow within the home. You need to look after it. You need to maintain it.
There's an enormous cost.
Clean it. There's a huge cost. Huge. And now too, and I don't like to say this, but when my clients say, oh, but what if it's a mistake? And what if I need it? Well, you know, a long time ago, we didn't have, you know, Kmart and Aldi and things like, do you know what I mean? Like, if you do make a mistake, I'm not saying throw out, you know, there's lots of things that we need to look at. You know, there's your treasured items and things like that we're a lot more careful about. But there's a lot of items in that home that you could go to get from Kmart tomorrow in a pinch that you would have, you know, it's not a problem. So, yeah, that's sort of how you need to kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
Do you have a process that you apply when you're thinking about or talking to your kids about buying things? Because there actually is like an enormous amount of discernment that we should really be showing, almost like with a minimalistic kind of edge to it around like what comes in, because everything that comes in, doesn't just come in effortlessly. It then needs to be at some point disposed of, stored, you know, like there's a lot of like it's big. It's weighty.
It is, and I was saying when I went through our playroom, like my husband said, oh, you're generally pretty good, but he goes, I think when we had children, you might have just lost your perspective a little bit there, like because there's just so much. If you get inundated with you need to have this thing and that thing, and I look back now and I think, oh, 3/4 of the stuff that we had, we didn't probably need. And in that process, like I sat with the kids for hours and hours and we went through it, and they see me do it all the time. And sometimes I think they think I'm going to throw everything out, and I don't. But that's also helped in when we do consume and when things come in, like to say to them, do you value it? You see that it takes up space. You see that you've got to give it a home. If there's nowhere to put it, like if you can't envision a home for it, then what are you going to give up in order to bring that in? Yeah, because I'm very particular, and we only have certain sort of spaces within the home. I don't like lots of things on the floor. The kids have their toy boxes, and everything else is sort of Montessori open, so on shelving and things. But as it starts to overflow that, they go, oh, mummy's what's mummy going to throw out today? And I'm not going to throw it out. And then I also talk about who could, you know, a couple of years ago, who could have, you know, you could have benefited from this because someone else was letting go of it. So if we let go of this, do we have any friends? Do we have any neighbours? Can we take it to the op shop? Does the school need it? And things like that. As well. So it's a lot of talking to them about
consuming. Yeah.
That's right. And it depends on a lot of that too will be your patterning. So it will also depend on what they're exposed to and what you've grown up with, and sometimes you really have to kind of check yourself with a lot of that. Like I have to think, why is that okay? Or what, my husband thinks that's quite different to me, and kind of all, I guess, working together, because everyone, like that dynamic is always changing and you're pushing everyone's buttons, and it's really interesting. And
amazing that imprint, isn't it? Because even today, like we went to the shops and my son walked into like this game shop and he immediately like had to have this thing, and he was like, Mum, I promise I'll pay you back. I just really want this. And he's talking at 100 miles an hour, and I could hear the emotion in his voice and I could feel the desperation in his body. And I said, Hugo, do you notice your voice right now? Do you notice how like your emotions are really strong and you just have this need that you have to have it? That means we're going to not get it right now. And we're going to take a couple of days, and you can think about it, and then you can bring your wallet back if it's what you really want. Because I don't think that this is a true decision for you right now. I think you've seen it and you want it and you just feel like you have to have it, but that's not the place to make a decision from. And it was really interesting because the same can be true of like the emotions that we kind of hold on to and get attached to about things in our home. To apply that even before it comes into the home is actually like far more empowering for both us and our kids.
And I say that to my son all the time. I said, well, why do you want that? Oh, because it's going to make me happy. I feel excited. I feel good. And then I can see, like, I'll stop him and he'll roll his eyes like, oh, here we go. Here's this spiel. What's what I'm going to say this time? And I'll be saying to you, well, what else? What can you do for yourself to make you feel that same way, that whatever that object will make you feel? Because at the end of the day, nothing outside of you will ever make you feel good if you don't feel good about you. And that's what I think a part of what I look at a house, like, it's about you, like, it's you, it's nothing else, it's you. And if you're not feeling good about you, it doesn't matter what else you have. That's the work, like, that's kind of the work there. But then too, I have to sometimes be like, well, they're still kids and they're still going to want things, and he's only 7. So my husband would be like, oh, come on, do we have to go so deep all the time? Like, can't you just have that? And I was just like, okay, because you know what, at the end of the day, that's just really nice and warm and fuzzy, and that makes you feel good. So sometimes
it's a balance, right?
The balance of that, but really trying to instill that into them, and then think, like, where am I going with that? Like, what path am I going down? Like, why am I thinking that? And how could I think differently about it as well? So it's just a lot of just constantly checking yourself and checking where, like, that rabbit hole or that neural pathway that your body, like your brain's.
But I think it's so important too, right? Because, like, these whole industries are built on knowing our psychology better than we do, right? So the fact that, like, we can apply these kind of principles is, a little bit of
literally taking your power back.
Yeah. I agree with that. And you say it all the time, Bridget, like, we worked in media, so we've seen that. And I'll say that to my son, he'll be watching the cricket and seeing the KFC ad. And I was like, do you know why you're doing that? Because they've got child psychologists working on those ads, like, so they're teaching you, so you're doing exactly what you want them to do, which is fun, but I want you to have an awareness. Like,
totally, we talk about it all the time.
But have an awareness that you're being manipulated in that way. Yeah.
My husband's good friends, who's a very fancy advertiser, didn't like it when I said that to him.
What did you say to him? What did you say?
So how do you feel about the fact that your children are being programmed and you're literally creating that? Not sure why he didn't like that.
Ouch.
I know. I then watched him go, well, they're not being programmed. I was like, Julie, leave it alone.
It's the urge to go back.
I went, oh, okay. What do you think it is? Like, Anyway, we're off topic. I would love to bring us back around just by summing up a few points and saying, Tara, if there's anything that you would love to add to that, because I always think once you've gone through a podcast like this, particularly when it's highlighting your spaces and places physically and metaphysically that feel stuck and hard, it can feel foggy and overwhelming and too hard, and you're going to want to go like, but just tell me what to do. Just tell me the one thing. And I just want to make sure we're speaking to those people and saying, just listen to this again if you need to, because there can be a real beauty in first letting it sit wherever it sits, and then second, going back and listening with a bit more of a strategy in mind. I'm going to write down the things that I hear, the questions I want to ask myself, the ways that I want to go about this. If you're feeling like you want support and nourishment with that, then I would really, really offer you to reach out to Tara and say, actually, I really want and recognize that I need some support in creating this manifest space within my home, knowing that that helps easefully and artfully move me into the up-leveling that I'm asking myself to do, and you don't have to do it alone. Women can do hard things, but we need support in order to do that. We don't have to, and nor can we, do it all and succeed well with that. That's why we have support crews. So here's what really stood out to me, and you tell me if you would love to fill in any blanks that I've missed.
Go for it.
So to that woman, number one, what is going on in your home and psyche, and what does that represent to you? Number two, then when you look around your room or your home and you recognize that piles are unmade decisions, what does that reflect to you? Where's your area of resistance or growth? and how can you more artfully step into that? When clearing out, know that everything needs a home, a purpose, or a function, or you need to make a decision, and it's okay to sit with that. And number 4, make manifest the space that liberates you. Create your sanctuary. Is it part of the vision of who you are becoming?
I love that.
You want
yeah, no, 100%. I was just going to say, it's all about, I guess, nourishing your soul. So it's all about knowing, you know, going deep and getting to know you and sitting with you in those areas that are really hard, just to sit with them and keep sitting with them. And for a couple of days, maybe, like, I guess really look at last year and be like, well, what was really, really hard? Like, what is really stopping my flow? What is making my life hard? What am I complaining about? Like, what is coming up constantly? And then just sit with it. And then the next day for 5 minutes longer, sit with it, and then make one decision. I just say just one small decision, because it's practice. It's also a skill set, you know, getting organized and making decisions and changing habits and behaviors is strengthening and I guess I just lost my train of thought then. But it's a skill set. So it's a mastery. And with anything, you have to start somewhere. And as you make one, you'll make another, and you make another, you make another. And also procrastination is just fear. Mm-hmm. So most of this is just fear. What are we scared of? Because at the end of the day, like if 2020 taught us anything, you know, we have no control over anything but us and our families. And that's do you know what I mean? That's what's important. So don't then have sort of materialistic items getting in the way of you and your greatness and your magnificence and you being the best version of you. And you will learn so much about yourself by just walking. I just say, take a walk around your house. Everything that you want to know about you is in there at home. It's all there, and it's all being reflected back really at you.
So, Tara, we would love for you to tell us how we can connect with you and where we find you, and what sort of help and services you can offer someone who really is like, I'm ready for support to do this really hard up-leveling.
Sure. I have my website, so it's thehouseholdadvisor.com. So all my offerings are on there. I can also be found on Instagram and Facebook, which is the same, The Household Advisor. I have 8 workbooks, so they're like journal prompts in different areas, which is a really nice starting point for people that kind of know that they want to change but kind of want to dip their toe in the water. And I said that will have you really seeing your spaces differently. Some are for treasured items, some are for organisational blocks. Like, they're all got sort of different themes. So depending on where you're at is kind of where you can dive in there. I also have 2 one-on-one consultations available. So one is moving beyond your stuck places. So nourish your home or nourish yourself. And they start in sort of different spots, and again you get your workbook with those, and then you work with me in a Zoom consultation and we do follow-ups, and I sort of facilitate and walk you through where you are stuck. And I've also just launched my Getting Organised for School ebook. So it's my first ebook, which is all my organisational wisdom imparted in there in the last it was about 4 years of school, and how we've sort of created and set up our spaces and lunch boxes and routines to facilitate the most easeful school experience for the children and for myself, so we can get out the door every day a little bit less stress. So there's lots of offerings, and I also have I'm happy to tailor mentoring programs to the needs of clients. So I've had lots of people reach out and have had specific areas that they're wanting to look at that they weren't quite sure. So please feel free to send me an email or a direct message and ask me a question, and we can get started.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And we're also lucky enough to have you coming into Soul Driven Motherhood in the month of February as well, where we're putting together a workbook with you to share with everybody in there to help work through some of those spaces. And then we are inviting the beautiful women in Soul Driven Motherhood to actually video and share with the community their own stuck places in their home. And Tara's going to pick 2 spaces to analyse and work through live with some women in the group. So we're really, really lucky to have you in there. And of course, like any kind of space, they're all mirrors for each other. So we're going to learn so much about our own space simply by seeing how you work with women in their spaces.
100%. I will be learning along with all of you as well. So thank you. I'm so excited. So excited. I love it. Every time, as I said, every time I work with someone new and go into a new home, I learn, I have a great time, but I also learn a lot about myself as well, which is wonderful.
Beautiful. So amazing. Thank you. So if you're ready to connect the dots between what you've decided you want to manifest in, hopefully you've done that in your month of January, and you want to bring that through into what that looks like as you stepping forwards as a woman in the world and certainly within your space, then please come and join us for Liberate with Tara in the month of February in Soul Driven Motherhood, which you can find out about at nourishingthemother.com.au or Nourishing the Mother on socials. We will have all of Tara's links, including where you can find her workbook and workbooks and services in the show notes. And of course, we'll be talking about her through the month of Feb. So please find the way that feels best for you to connect, because there's nothing more than all 3 of us want than for women. And I guess our hearts is most particularly taken by mothers who we know it is such an experience of self-evolution and trying to balance the raising and the values and the experiencing of the world through these children that come through us, and trying to do that for ourselves in a really meaningful and rich way. So we really all want you to be liberated and to feel that, and however we can best facilitate that, we would really love the honour to be able to. So please make sure you connect with Tara at the Household Advisor and us, Nourishing the Mother, and we'll see you in Soul Driven Motherhood.
We will. And connect with you, Jules.
Is julietenner.love and Ubridge.
suburbansandcastles.com. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.